My friends at Easy Cater are workplace catering pros, helping you find food for everything from daily employee meals to staff meetings and special events. Visit easycater.com/leaderassistant to find out more. Hey friends, welcome to episode 112. You can check out the show notes at leaderassistant.com/112. Before we jump in, I just wanted to let you know that my Kindle ebook, my Amazon Kindle ebook, The Leader Assistant: 4 Pillars of a Confident Game-Changing Assistant, is only 99 cents. That's 99 cents USD. This week only, which is Administrative Professionals Week. Administrative Professionals Day in the U.S. is Wednesday, April 21st. So in honor of you all, the leader assistants in the world, I wanted to offer my book for just 99 cents. So amazon.leaderassistant.com, and you can grab the Kindle ebook. You don't need a Kindle device. You can read the book on your phone. You can read the book on the Kindle app. You can read it even logged into your Amazon Kindle account in your browser. So amazon.leaderassistant.com. The ebook is only 99 cents for this week only. Hope you can check it out. Thanks for reading, and I hope you enjoy this episode.
The Leader Assistant podcast exists to encourage and challenge assistants to become confident, game-changing leader assistants.
Thank you for listening to the Leader Assistant podcast.
Hey friends, thanks for tuning in to the Leader Assistant podcast. It's your host, Jeremy Burrows, and today I'm speaking with Karen Isaacs. Karen is Director of Administrative Staffing with the Goodkind Group. Karen, how's it going?
Very well.
Where are you in the world?
I am New York, specifically Long Island.
Nice. Have you been there a while?
Yes, I've my whole life except for college in Boston.
Cool. And you work for the Goodkind Group. Give us a quick 60-second pitch on what do you guys do?
So I've been with Peter Goodkind since the beginning of our career, and went through a couple of iterations. And I do the administrative executive assistants. Been doing this since 1987, dating myself here. And the firm has various areas of practice: accounting, finance, IT, healthcare, digital marketing. And I do both, mostly permanent EA hires, but definitely a nice amount of temp and temp to perm.
Okay, so were you an assistant in your prior life, or why did you get into the administrative staffing?
So I wanted to sell ad space out of college, and, you're not getting those jobs for Vogue or Time magazine. And a friend of mine, he was in what they called back then the agency. It was really, a whole different world. And he thought my personality would be perfect. And I then interviewed at several firms. And the first firm was where I met Peter Goodkind, MA Management. I just knew that this was the right business for me. And then when Peter started his own firm, I was his first employee, and no looking back, 35 years later.
But their focus isn't strictly on administrative staff, right? Like, don't they hire different roles?
Right. So the firm is split up where there's a different area of practice. So I've always stayed with placing executive assistants. It's just what I started with and just stuck with for various reasons, which I'm sure we'll talk about, and just really cultivated a niche. And here we are.
Awesome. So how many assistants have you placed in your estimation?
It's funny you say that. Before quarantine, I started to count. It was well over 2,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming all various titles, right? Administrative assistant,
yes.
Executive assistant. What are some of the more interesting titles?
I really, executive assistant, chief of staff, sometimes, now the new word is chief people officer, but it's really within the administrative support category, hence why I was drawn to you and your podcast. And, so I've listened to several, obviously. So really within the administrative office manager, no fancy things.
Yeah. What do you look for when you're trying to find an assistant to place?
Okay, so that's easy. I'm very instinctual and guttural, and I'm usually right. And to me, it's a connectability. So when a candidate is just, I shared in my notes with you, just be who you are. And they're not struggling, and there's not canned answers, and there's just a natural flow. Then obviously after that, I dig down for the specifics depending on the role, or if it's in real estate or a hedge fund or media. And I really go with my instincts. They're rarely off.
So if you were to train someone to do your job, how would you help them learn those instincts?
Yeah. So funny enough, my boss used to call it the Isaac's Boot Camp. And, I've trained people because I think everyone can learn from different people and different strengths. And there was a time when I was managing and training people, and there were at least 10, 15 people in my group, all really talented for different reasons. So I would tell, take a little of me, a little of him, a little of her, and then you have to, and it goes to the EAs, you have to be who you are. I mean, I hope this doesn't come across disrespectful to people on my side, but it's not rocket science, just in terms of use your common sense. You ask the obvious questions to see if they fit the role. You have to dig deep. You have to be thorough, clearly. But when you really cultivate a natural relationship with the candidate, it's then the rest just flows, I think. Sense of urgency of someone in my business. You either have that or not. I don't know that you can learn that.
Yeah. So when you meet someone that you're like, this is a good connection, this is a good fit for this role we're trying to fill, what's kind of the process from there to, when do you talk about salary needs, and what are the best practices in your mind as far as talking about numbers?
So, the laws have changed. It used to be where clients were asking for pay stubs, and now in the last year or so, the rule of thumb is ask the candidate, what are your salary requirements? And because I've already developed a good relationship with the candidate, it's not the first thing I ask. I just naturally connect with them, and then that just unfolds, and there's usually obviously a range. And then if the candidate fits a particular role, clearly I go over point by point what the candidate has or doesn't have. One of my strengths, and I'm sure I've listened to some of your other podcasts with other people in my industry, never force an issue. Don't, take a square and shove it in a circle. And this way the right fit is made. I really care so deeply about the candidate and the fit for them and the client. So then it's just asking, going through their background. 99% of the time, the clients do a background check. So we want to make sure we don't come up, at the end of in the nth hour, any snafus. So we cover that. And then a lot of it is chemistry. So an EA to a CEO of a hedge fund versus a pharma company, sometimes it's a lot of the time culture fit.
Yeah. So what happens if you find a really good fit and, you guys kind of get into the process, but that executive or that principal doesn't want to pay what that EA needs to make?
Thankfully, we rarely come across that because both my clients and my candidates, again, the relationship is so strong prior. You try to negotiate, again, you don't want to force anything. The clients want to, I work with phenomenal firms. There's, top firms, the integrity. So they are therefore able to attract the candidate. They're not going to nickel and dime it. Both clients and candidate, are reasonable. One of the best answers I ever heard was a candidate that I was representing. And when we were getting close to offer, they asked her what she was looking for. And she said, well, I know that XYZ firm will make me a fair offer for you and for me. And I just thought that was classy. And this way we were able to keep it open without locking down a number.
Yeah, that's great. We actually had a conversation, a webinar the other day about negotiation. And that was one of the points is, coming back and saying, I know you'll be fair in your offer.
Right. And they really are. I mean, again, I work with top firms, so they, reputation is stellar.
Yeah. So, okay, let's hear some mistakes or some failure stories over your years. What's a story maybe of a candidate you placed and it just went really, really, really poorly?
So good question. A couple of years ago, I met with a candidate and my instincts, I didn't love her. She was very reserved. I really feel one of my strengths is I usually can connect to most people. If someone's more reserved, clearly I'm not just going to bombard them with my energy. And the process, while she was reserved, it was okay. We cultivated a relationship and I'm very honest. And if I can't give them constructive criticism and if they can't take it, then we're not going to be able to have a productive relationship. So, during the process, I would tell her, listen, you come across a little reserved and I want you to show a little more personality. And she would show it and warm up, but then retreat. And sure enough, before the guarantee period, she was in fact let go because she was so reserved that she couldn't even cultivate relationships inside or on behalf of her client. So I don't know if that's a huge snafu, but my instincts were right, and also I have a great relationship with this particular client. She was actually on my side of the business, which makes for the best clients because they understand the frustrations and the ups and downs. And then another quick one was a candidate who was interviewing for a huge EA to a CEO of a global insurance firm. And she had worked for a financial firm, and we went over the background and when and if there's an offer made, they check dates of employment and education and, all the obvious. We went over it for the 3 months that she was in the pipeline, and they didn't even need a college degree for this job. And in the end, when she said she fabricated her document from this particular school. Wow. And it just kicks you in the hiney in the end. And it was unnecessary, especially because they didn't even need the degree for this position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I'm an executive assistant in New York City and I have 6 years of C-suite experience, what is a salary range that I could expect?
6 years. So that's changed. It's when it's a candidate market, clearly before all of this, prior to March 2020, it was a candidate's market. Now it's not. So the answer changes. So right now, 6 years, 80 base.
Okay.
Plus bonus. And if it's a financial firm, there's bonus eligible and paid OT. And if it's not a financial firm or not a hedge fund, maybe 70.
And then what do you do to kind of, trying to think of the word, basically if I'm a candidate and I'm looking for a role, how do I know that, whether it's you or another placement firm, how do I know that they have and you have my best interest at heart, when really you could look at it as, well, you work for the client and you're trying to get them, the best assistant, and, you could argue the cheapest and the best assistant.
Right.
So how do I know that, and how can I trust that you or other placement, firms will take care of me and really fight for me?
Okay. So I love this question, and it's my heart. I'm very, very open. I'm very real. I'm very genuine. I'm very direct. 99.9% of the candidates that I represent, even if they're my colleague's candidate and we work together as a team, they just know that I have their back. So today, for instance, one of my candidates told me why she didn't want to pursue a particular role. And right away, I understood where she was coming from. And she also knows me a long time, but I'm never one to force something. It always backfires. So, and I never give up on them. It could be, 13 years later, truly. I placed someone last year who I've known for 13 years. We've been in touch off and on. I'm a huge, I keep in touch with people really 35 years later. So we really cultivate a relationship, and it could be in 3 days or months or years. So with that comes so many examples that they know I have their back.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a long-term relationship, not a, hey, I'm going to place you here and then peace out.
Never. And in fact, many candidates, and this is how I get most of my clients, if I represent a candidate and I can't place them because they get another role through their friend or another agency, they share with me. I'm not one, I don't call the other firms. I work all referrals. I don't cold call. So they know that I care, and therefore they share. And if they do get a role through another firm, sometimes they share some horror stories, and they know that I care so much. So maybe a month or 5 years later, they then introduce me to that firm.
Yeah.
So I wish them good luck. It was actually, back in the early 90s, it's how I got, one of my candidates got an offer through me and an offer through another agency. And when she turned ours down, my first gut was, oh, darn. But I was like, congratulations. When you get yourself settled, maybe you can introduce me. And sure enough, she did. And it turned out to be a great client. And she stayed there for her whole career.
Yeah. So if I'm looking for work, whether I'm tired of my current role or just, unemployed and just trying to find a role, what are two things that I should be prioritizing and should be on the top of my list as far as finding that role?
Really, it's the soft skills, the intangibles, the culture fit, because an EA to 5 portfolio managers or a CEO or a CTO, they can 99% of the time, they can do most of these jobs. It's scheduling these executives all over the world and back, and, their calendar management and dealing with their clients. So after that, it's just a chemistry with the executives, I think. So that's what I encourage people, just like I'm big on gut instincts, I encourage my candidates to plug into that as well.
So what, though, can we do if I'm unemployed and, to get me to these conversations and, get me the phone call, get me the screen?
So if they're working with a staffing agency or someone like me, it's then, when I get a position, then I speak to the client, explain why the candidate fits. 99% of the time, my clients trust me. So if I tell them, Jane Doe fits this role or John Doe fits this role, the client goes into it with a trust. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to think, like, if somebody's listening to this podcast right now and they're out of work, which I know there are assistants that email me every week, every other day sometimes, saying they're out of work or they're looking for new work. What's something they can do just personally too? Like, you mentioned soft skills. Should they focus on their resume? Should they focus on doing LinkedIn research and networking? What's something that they can do on their own?
I think it's a combination of everything. I do think that candidates who overthink their resume, to me, the resume should just read clearly, no typos, nothing fancy, formatted properly. But sometimes candidates get embedded in the weeds in the resume. So get the resume, develop relationships, don't sit behind a screen. Clearly, people can't be out in the world now, so it's a whole different ball game. But, prior and soon, hopefully, they, volunteer, network, be out there. I've recently, last year, I've been posting a lot on LinkedIn, so I've been attracting great talent. And, so I now have, a whole new group of great candidates. So they should be on LinkedIn developing these relationships with other staffing firms. And there's so many. And sometimes you hear some horror stories. So again, I go back to use your gut instincts. If you're working with an agency or a person at an agency and they're treating you right, they just cultivate that relationship.
Yeah. Awesome, Karen. Well, thank you so much for sharing. How can people reach out to you, get connected with you, and learn more about what you're up to? And maybe if they're looking for a role and want to, consider you and your firm, where should they go?
Karen at thegoodkindgroup.com. And I'm on LinkedIn sharing a lot of stories of what I call Jane and John Doe journeys of candidates and clients, and hopefully sharing a little inspiration that way. We all need a little bit. I think it helps motivate people. If they feel a little safer, then they'll present better. So I'm on LinkedIn as well.
Great. Well, I'll put those links in the show notes. Is there anything you want to say just as a send-off to encourage those listening who, you mentioned it's not really a candidate market right now with the pandemic, and it can be very discouraging. I know some assistants have been applying for, dozens and dozens of roles over the last several months. What's a word of encouragement for those listening that are discouraged on their job hunt?
So, yeah, I've been saying this from day one. It's true all the time. Good people land. Stay the course. Don't stop. Keep making relationships. Be very open to constructive criticism. And just, do what you have to do to kind of change your mindset. So if you're having a down day, step away, take a walk, go for a swim, walk in the woods. It changes your whole mentality, and then you come back more energized.
Love it. That's great, Karen. Thank you so much again, and appreciated chatting with you, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Please review on Apple Podcasts. GoBulls.com